Ethan never thought space would feel so quiet. The outpost floated above a gray and rocky moon, far from Earth and far from the busy trade lanes. He had joined the expedition to learn, to see other worlds, and maybe to prove that humans could belong out here among the stars. Most of the crew were not human at all. They came from dozens of worlds, speaking dozens of languages, yet somehow the station had found a rhythm. Among all of them, one alien stood out to Ethan more than the rest. Her name was Kalara. She belonged to a warrior race known across the galaxy for their strength and honor. She was tall, with sharp features, and her voice carried weight even when she spoke softly. Many of the other crew gave her space, as if they feared her. Ethan did not. To him, Kalara was just another crewmate, and sometimes even a friend. It started one afternoon during training. The outpost leaders wanted all crew members to know at least some basic defense. Pirates and raiders often attack stations this far out, and nobody wanted to be helpless. Kalara had been assigned to teach close combat. Ethan, curious and perhaps a little too eager, volunteered to be her sparring partner. The training floor was wide and polished. Other crew stood around to watch, whispering in their own languages. Ethan stepped into the circle, his heart thumping. Kalara tilted her head at him, as if amused that a human would step forward against her. "You are brave," she said, her voice calm, "but you may regret this." "I learn faster when I get bruises," Ethan replied with a grin. The sparring began. Kalara moved like flowing water, fast and precise. Ethan tried to keep up, blocking here, dodging there, but her strikes landed again and again. Still, he refused to back away. Every time he was thrown down, he got up again. The watching crew began to murmur. Then, something unexpected happened. In the middle of the match, Ethan managed to surprise Kalara. He rolled under her arm and tapped her side. It was not a real hit, but enough to show that he had improved. For a brief moment, Kalara's eyes widened in surprise. What happened next shocked everyone. With a sudden burst of energy, she pinned Ethan down. Her strength held him in place, and before anyone could react, she leaned close and bit his neck, not to hurt, but firm enough to leave a mark. At the same time, she growled a single word in her own language. The word was mine. The room fell silent. No one laughed, no one spoke. Even Kalara seemed startled by what she had done. She released Ethan at once and stepped back, her chest rising and falling as if she had just realized the weight of her action. Ethan sat up, confused. What just happened?" he asked, rubbing his neck. The other aliens avoided his eyes. Some looked uneasy, others even fearful. A whisper passed among them, repeated in different tongues but with the same meaning. Kalara stood tall, her expression unreadable. "It was not planned," she said firmly. "But it is done." Ethan blinked at her. "What is done?" She gave no answer. Instead, she turned and left the training hall, leaving Ethan surrounded by a crew that now stared at him very differently than before. That night, Ethan found the station quieter than usual. Crew members who normally joked with him now kept their distance. Even the bravest among them lowered their eyes when he walked past. It was as if a barrier had been placed around him, invisible yet heavy. Ethan could not sleep. He sat by the viewport, watching the stars. He touched the faint mark on his neck, still confused. What did Kalara mean? Why did the others act so strange? Only one thing was clear. Whatever happened in that training hall was no small matter. He had stepped into a tradition or a bond he did not understand, And now everything had changed. Far away, in her own quarters, Kalara sat in silence. She had not meant to claim him, yet instinct had taken over. To her people, abide and the word spoken meant protection, loyalty, and a bond that could not be ignored. She knew the crew would see Ethan differently now. So would enemies beyond the stars. Ethan was no longer just another human explorer. He was marked. And in the eyes of the galaxy, that meant far more than he realized. The next morning, Ethan walked through the outpost with a strange feeling. People still spoke, but their voices dropped when he came near. Crew members who had once shared meals with him now gave polite nods from a distance. Even the station guards, who normally joked during their patrols, stood stiff when he passed. Ethan scratched the back of his neck. "What's wrong with everyone?" he muttered. He thought about asking Kalara directly, but she had vanished after the sparring match. Her door stayed closed, and no one seemed willing to speak about her. Finally, Ethan decided to corner someone who might explain. He found Jorel, a short alien with blue skin who had always been friendly. Jorel worked in the mess hall and usually had more answers than anyone. "Hey," Ethan said, sliding onto the bench across from him. "Why does everyone keep looking at me like I grew an extra head?" Jorel shifted uncomfortably. His dark eyes flicked toward Ethan's neck, then back down at his meal. For a moment he said nothing. Then, in a low voice, he whispered, "She bit you. She marked you." Ethan frowned. "Yeah, I know that. But what does it mean?" Jorel leaned closer, speaking so softly that no one else could hear. "In her people's culture, a bite is not an attack. It is a bond. It says you are claimed, protected, part of her clan. No one will challenge you openly now. No one will even come too close." Ethan sat back, stunned. "So, wait. She basically told everyone I belong to her." Jorel nodded quickly. "Yes. And if anyone tries to harm you, they risk war with her entire species. That is why people keep their distance. You are not just Ethan anymore. You carry Kalara's mark." Ethan rubbed his temples. He had wanted to fit in with the crew, not stand out. Now he was being treated like someone untouchable. He didn't know whether to feel grateful or trapped. Later that day, Kalara finally appeared. She stood tall as always, her armor shining faintly under the station lights. When Ethan saw her walking toward him, the hallway grew silent. Crew members stepped aside to give her space. Ethan crossed his arms. "We need to talk." Kalara stopped in front of him. Her golden eyes studied his face with calm patience. "Then speak." "You bit me in front of everyone," Ethan said, lowering his voice. "Now the whole station acts like I'm wearing a crown I didn't ask for. Why? What does it mean to you?" Kalara tilted her head slightly. "It means you are under my protection. No enemy can touch you without facing me. No ally can betray you without dishonor. Among my people, it is the highest form of loyalty." "But I didn't ask for it," Ethan argued. "I was just trying to train. I wasn't looking to belong to anyone." For the first time, Kalara's face softened. "I know. It was not planned. Instinct guided me. Yet the bond is real now. Others will respect it, whether you want it or not." Ethan sighed, pressing his hand against the wall. "So I can't undo it?" Kalara shook her head. "No. But you are not chained. Think of it as a shield, not a cage. Her words stayed with Ethan long after she left. A shield, not a cage. Maybe that was true, but it still felt heavy. That night, the station alarms blared. A small raider ship had entered the area, testing the defenses. Ethan hurried to the command deck, joining the rest of the crew. Normally, raiders harassed outposts like this without fear. Yet when the enemy scanned the station and saw Kalara's clan insignia and the human standing at her side, they did something unexpected. They pulled back. No shots fired. No threats shouted. The raiders simply turned and left. Ethan stared at the screen. They ran away. One of the officers nodded slowly. Not from us. From you. Or rather, from what you carry. Ethan felt a chill. The mark on his neck was no longer just strange or embarrassing. It was a signal, one powerful enough to make enemies retreat. He didn't understand all of it yet, but one thing was clear. His life in the stars had just become far more complicated. And somewhere deep inside, he wondered if Kalara had known all along what this would mean. The days after the raider scare passed quietly, but Ethan felt the change in the air. Crew members no longer teased him during meals. Instead, they offered him the best seat, or quietly slid an extra portion of food his way. When he worked on maintenance, others rushed to help before he even asked. Ethan knew they weren't doing it because of him. They were doing it because of the mark Kalara had left. Kalara, for her part, acted as if nothing unusual had happened. She trained in the gym, studied battle maps, and walked the halls with her usual calm strength. If she noticed how others treated Ethan, she did not comment. But her sharp eyes always seemed to find him in a crowd, as if silently making sure he was safe. 1 week later, the outpost received new orders. A trade fleet needed escort through the frontier, an area of space known for danger. Pirate clans roamed there, waiting for easy prey. Most crews avoided that zone, but the fleet carried supplies that nearby colonies desperately needed. The outpost was the closest station with enough ships to guard them. Ethan listened to the briefing in the command room. The officers showed maps of the frontier, pointing out common ambush points and safe routes. The crew muttered uneasily. Everyone knew this would be risky. After the meeting, Ethan caught Kalara by the arm. "Are you sure about this? The raiders out there are worse than the one we just saw." Kalara's golden eyes met his. "That is why we must go. The colonies need us. Fear cannot decide for us." Ethan nodded slowly. He admired her courage, even if he wasn't sure he shared it. When the convoy departed, the outpost's small fleet formed a protective ring around the freighters. Ethan stood on the bridge of their ship, watching the stars slide by. The frontier stretched before them, empty, silent, but full of hidden dangers. Hours passed. The crew stayed tense, weapons ready. Then the scanners lit up. Several raider ships appeared on the edge of the system, closing in fast. Alarms rang. "Here they come," muttered the helmsman. The raiders hailed them. On the screen, a scarred alien with burning eyes sneered. "Easy prey," he said. "Surrender the cargo, or we take it." But then his gaze shifted. His eyes narrowed as he studied the image feed. Ethan stood near Kalara, the mark on his neck faintly visible under the collar of his uniform. A long silence followed. The raider leader leaned back, his face hardening. "That mark belongs to the warrior clans," he said at last. His tone carried something close to respect, or perhaps fear. "And you are the human they claimed." Ethan blinked, unsure how to respond. He simply stood there as the raiders' sneer faded. Without another word, the enemy ships pulled back. One by one, they vanished into the dark. The bridge crew stared at the screen, shocked. "They left," whispered the helmsman. "They actually left." Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Because of the mark again," he said quietly. The officer in charge nodded. "Word spreads fast in the frontier. They know Kalara's people do not bluff. To challenge the human she marked is to invite a war they cannot win." For the rest of the journey, no raiders came near. The fleet reached the colonies safely, and grateful settlers cheered as supplies were delivered. That night, back on the ship, Ethan sat in the mess hall, staring at his food. He should have felt relieved, even proud. But part of him was unsettled. He had done nothing to scare off the raiders. It was Kalara's mark, not his own strength, that had saved them. Kalara entered quietly and sat across from him. She studied him for a moment, then asked, "You are troubled?" Ethan sighed. "Everyone treats me like I'm untouchable, but it's not really me they fear. It's you. It's your people. I don't know if I deserve this." Kalara folded her arms. "Deserve? That is a human word. Among my kind, worth is proven over time. The bond means I stand with you, but it does not erase who you are. What matters is how you use the protection you carry." Her words sank deep into Ethan's mind. Maybe she was right. Maybe the mark wasn't just a weight but also a chance to do good. As the ship turned back toward the frontier, Ethan made a quiet decision. If the galaxy saw him as special now, then he would find a way to live up to it. Days passed in a rhythm of routine and careful training, but for Ethan and Kalara, things began to change in ways neither expected. Life on the outpost was usually predictable, yet the bond marked by Kalara's bite seemed to grow stronger with every shared moment. Kalara began including Ethan in her training sessions more often. At first, it was just practice learning moves, improving reflexes, and building endurance. Ethan struggled to keep up, but Kalara never mocked him. Instead, she guided him patiently, correcting his stance and explaining the reasoning behind each movement. "You must not only move with your body," she said one afternoon, her voice calm, "but with your mind. Anticipate, understand, then act." Ethan nodded, sweat dripping down his forehead. "I'm trying," he admitted. "Humans don't usually move like you." Kalara smiled faintly, a rare gesture. "That is why you are unpredictable. Unpredictability can be strength." Even during quiet moments, the bond showed itself. Ethan found himself sitting near Kalara in the mess hall, sharing stories of Earth, of his childhood, and of adventures he had always dreamed about. She listened attentively, asking questions that revealed genuine interest. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt that someone completely understood him. In return, Kalara asked him about human ways, about humor, music, and traditions from Earth. Ethan explained simple things, like how children play games that involve running, hiding, and laughing. Kalara listened carefully, fascinated by ideas so different from her people's disciplined lives. The other crew noticed the growing closeness. They whispered quietly but never intruded. Some smiled knowingly when the two shared a private laugh, while others kept their distance, respecting the bond that had begun with a single mark on Ethan's neck. One evening, a simulation exercise tested the crew in a mock attack. Ethan and Kalara had to work together to protect a group of freighters in the simulation. At first, their coordination was awkward. Ethan hesitated, unsure of how to anticipate Kalara's movements. She hesitated too, learning to trust his decisions. Then something changed. Ethan took a bold move, predicting where Kalara would strike. She adjusted instantly, moving in perfect sync with him. The simulation ended, and the crew erupted in cheers. Ethan and Kalara shared a glance that spoke more than words ever could. In that moment, they were a team more than colleagues, more than friends. Later, as they walked back through the quiet corridors, Kalara spoke softly. "You are learning quickly," she said. "I underestimated humans." Ethan laughed. "You did, huh? I guess I'm full of surprises." Her eyes sparkled with amusement. "Yes, and that is why the bond works. It is not only my protection that matters. It is your courage, your quick thinking, and your will. Together, we are stronger." For the first time, Ethan understood what the mark truly meant. It was not just about being claimed or protected. It was about trust and cooperation. Kalara had seen something in him, something worth defending, and he had begun to see the same in her. The bond even affected small moments on the station. When alarms sounded in the middle of the night, Ethan instinctively reached for Kalara. She smiled, a rare gentle expression, and the crew around them noticed the calm that radiated from the two. Where one went, the other instinctively followed. Together, they brought stability to a station often rattled by the dangers of the frontier. Ethan realized he was no longer just a human marked by a warrior. He had become part of a partnership, a bond that was both practical and deeply personal. Kalara, too, began to relax around him. The warrior who had always kept others at a distance now shared quiet moments, laughter, and thoughtful conversation with someone she had once only considered a trainee. By the end of the week, the crew had noticed the transformation. Where once Ethan had been cautious and unsure, he now carried himself with confidence. Kalara, too, seemed lighter, less guarded, more willing to share who she truly was. The mark on Ethan's neck was no longer a symbol of fear or respect alone. It had become the starting point of a bond that would shape their journey through the stars. And in the quiet moments, when the lights of distant planets glimmered through the station's windows, both of them understood that this bond would change everything to come. The peace they had enjoyed at the outpost did not last long. Word of Ethan's mark and his connection to Kalara's clan had traveled faster than anyone expected. Messages came in from distant systems, warning of a warlord who considered the frontier his domain. He had heard of the human claimed by a warrior and was not pleased. Ethan first learned of the threat during a briefing. The command officer, a tall alien with silver skin, addressed the crew with a grave tone. "Warlord Dravik believes the mark on our human is an insult. He plans to send forces to prove that humans are weak, and that Kalara's claim means nothing." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had trained with Kalara, learned some of her combat techniques, but he was still human. Humans were not known for raw strength in the galaxy, and he worried about what might happen. Kalara stepped forward, her presence calm and commanding. "If he wishes to test the claim, we will be ready. But remember this, strength is not only in the body. Courage, strategy, and loyalty are just as powerful." Ethan nodded, though he was still uneasy. That night, as he prepared his gear, he tried to focus. He reviewed what he had learned in training, memorized battle maneuvers, and practiced quick thinking exercises. Kalara watched silently, offering advice only when needed. Days later, the warlord's ships appeared at the edge of the system. They were massive, dark, and heavily armed. The crew scrambled to their stations as alarms blared. Ethan's heart raced, but Kalara placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You are not alone, she said. Remember the bond. Trust in it. The battle began with the warlord's forces closing in fast. Lasers cut through space as the outpost's small fleet responded. Kalara moved with precision, coordinating attacks and defending the freighters. Ethan stayed close, observing and learning from every move. Suddenly, one of the warlord's strike teams targeted Ethan directly. A sleek fighter ship aimed straight for him, as if knowing that taking him down first would break Kalara's morale. Ethan froze for a moment, then remembered Kalara's words. Courage was not absence of fear, it was acting despite it. He activated the ship's evasive thrusters, narrowly avoiding the first volley. Then he used a quick calculation to predict the fighter's next move, dodging again and luring it into a trap. The fighter crashed into an asteroid, destroyed without a single crew casualty. Kalara's eyes widened slightly. She had not expected Ethan to act with such instinct and courage. Slowly, she began to realize that the human she had marked was not weak at all. He was quick, clever, and fearless in ways that were uniquely human. The battle continued for hours. Ethan worked alongside Kalara, guiding ships, making decisions, and using every skill he had learned. Each time he acted, the warlord's forces hesitated, confused by the human who moved with the precision of a trained warrior but the unpredictability of someone who did not follow tradition. Finally, the warlord's command ship appeared. Dravik's image filled the screen, his face twisted with rage. "I will take him," he shouted. "The human cannot hide behind a warrior forever." Kalara stood tall on the bridge. "You underestimate him," she said. "And you will regret it." Ethan felt a surge of confidence. He was not alone. The bond with Kalara gave him strength he had never known. Together, they coordinated a counterattack that forced Dravik's fleet to retreat. The warlord's ships fled, leaving the system in silence. The crew erupted in cheers. Ethan sank into his chair, breathing heavily but smiling. Kalara approached him, her expression proud. "You did well," she said simply. "Not because of me, but because of yourself." Ethan touched the mark on his neck and realized something important. The bond had started with Kalara protecting him, but it had grown into a partnership. Together, they had faced an enemy that many would have thought unstoppable, and they had won. From that day forward, Ethan was no longer just a human marked by a warrior. He was a symbol of courage and intelligence. Aliens and humans alike began to see him differently. He had proven that a human could stand against the galaxy's dangers and hold their own beside a warrior like Kalara. The frontier was still dangerous, but Ethan now understood his place in it. With Kalara by his side, and with the bond that had started with a single bite, he was ready for whatever the stars would throw at him next. After the battle with Warlord Dravik, the outpost returned to its usual routines, but the atmosphere had changed. Crew members no longer saw Ethan as just a young human explorer. They saw a symbol of courage, someone who had stood against danger and survived. Yet, Ethan himself felt that the real test was far from over. He spent his days training, learning from Kalara, and preparing for whatever might come next. The frontier was unpredictable. Raiders and warlords watched, waiting for weakness. Ethan understood that being marked by Kalara was not just protection, it was a responsibility. One morning, Kalara found Ethan in the training hall, practicing with a sparring dummy. She watched silently for a few moments before speaking. "You have grown," she said. "Not in strength alone, but in resolve. Soon, the frontier will test that resolve again." Ethan wiped sweat from his brow. "I hope I'm ready," he admitted. It is not enough to survive with your protection. I need to stand on my own, too. Kalara nodded approvingly. And you will. Humans have a different kind of strength. You adapt. You think quickly. That is why the bond works. Together, we are stronger. That very evening, a warning signal lit the command deck. Scouts had detected a fleet approaching another group of raiders, larger and faster than anything they had faced before. Their target was the outpost, and this time, their focus seemed to be on Ethan. The crew rushed to their stations. Ethan's heart pounded, but he did not hesitate. He took a deep breath and remembered Kalara's words, "Courage is acting despite fear." He moved to the navigation console, guiding ships into strategic positions and coordinating defenses with precision. Kalara stayed close, her presence reassuring. "Trust yourself," she said. "Trust your decisions." "I trust you." The raiders attacked swiftly. Lasers and energy pulses filled space as ships maneuvered to gain advantage. Ethan called out directions to the crew, predicting enemy movements and coordinating their responses. His quick thinking prevented several ships from being hit and turned the tide of the battle. At one point, a raider ship broke through the defenses and aimed directly for Ethan's command vessel. He froze for only a moment, then remembered the training, the lessons, and the bond that tied him to Kalara. With a quick maneuver, he lured the enemy ship into a narrow asteroid field. The raider miscalculated, colliding with an asteroid and destroying itself. Kalara's eyes widened in admiration. "Well done," she said. "You have learned quickly." The battle continued for hours. Ethan acted with intelligence, foresight, and calm determination. Each decision he made kept the crew safe and frustrated the raiders. He realized that strength did not always mean physical power. Strategy, courage, and unity could be just as effective. Finally, the raider fleet faltered. Their attacks became disorganized, and their leader ordered a retreat. Ethan had held his ground, defended the outpost, and proven that a human could be more than just a target. When the alarms quieted and the fleet had retreated, the crew cheered. Ethan felt exhausted but alive in a way he had never felt before. He had faced fear, danger, and overwhelming odds, and he had prevailed. Kalara approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Today, you did not just survive," she said. "You stood your ground. You acted as an equal, not as someone needing protection. That is true courage." Ethan touched the mark on his neck and smiled. He realized that the bite that had started this journey was no longer just a symbol of Kalara's protection. It represented trust, partnership, and the strength that comes from standing side by side with someone you respect. The frontier would always hold dangers, but Ethan no longer feared them as he once had. He had learned to act with intelligence, courage, and the support of a true ally. Together with Kalara, he could face anything. For the first time, Ethan understood what the bond meant. It was not just about being claimed or protected. It was about rising to challenges, proving oneself, and standing tall, no matter the odds. And with that understanding, he knew he was ready for whatever the galaxy had in store. The frontier had quieted, but the ripples of Ethan's courage traveled far and wide. Stories of the human who had been marked by Kalara, the warrior from a feared clan, began to spread across systems. Traders spoke of him in hushed tones. Scouts whispered his name to warn others. Even distant colonies shared tales of the human who had faced raiders and survived. Ethan walked through the outpost corridors, noticing the difference in how people looked at him. Some gave nods of respect. Others glanced away, cautious and polite. He touched the faint mark on his neck and remembered Kalera's words, the bond was both protection and responsibility. Kalera joined him at the observation deck, watching distant stars flicker. "They speak of you," she said quietly, her voice calm but proud. Ethan shrugged, a small smile forming. "I don't know if I like being famous. Everyone acts like I'm untouchable." "You are untouchable only in the way the galaxy sees it," Kalera replied. "You are respected because of courage, strategy, and loyalty. Not because of fear alone." Over the following weeks, the outpost received messages from neighboring systems. Many requested assistance, fearing raids, pirates, or unknown threats. The story of the human who could stand beside Kalera inspired confidence and caution in equal measure. Leaders and civilians alike wanted someone like him on their side. Ethan found himself working closely with Kalera in planning missions. Together, they coordinated defenses, escorted trade convoys, and trained the crew. Each operation further proved the value of their bond. Where Kalera brought skill and strength, Ethan brought quick thinking, creativity, and an understanding of humans' unique adaptability. Together, they had become a team that few could challenge. One evening, after a long mission, Ethan and Kalera sat overlooking the outpost docks. Ships glimmered under the dim lights, and the stars beyond stretched infinitely. "Do you ever wonder what this all means?" Ethan asked. "Being marked, standing out, it's more than I ever expected." Kalera studied him. "It means you are part of something greater than yourself. The mark brought attention, yes, but your actions have made it real. You are no longer just a human explorer. You are a symbol." Ethan laughed softly. "A symbol? Me? I did what I had to do. And in doing so," Kalera said, "you inspired respect, loyalty, and courage. That is no small thing. The galaxy will remember you." Word reached even distant warlords and traitors. Some avoided systems where Ethan was stationed, unwilling to risk challenging him. Others came cautiously, seeking alliance or trade, curious to meet the human who had proven that one person, even from a seemingly weak species, could stand beside a mighty warrior and change the balance of power. For Ethan, the attention was strange, but he learned to accept it. He trained harder, thought faster, and acted with care. He realized that reputation alone could influence the galaxy, but only actions gave it weight. The bond that had started with a single bite was now a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared courage. Kalera often reminded him of this during quiet walks across the outpost. "You carry the mark," she said, "but it is your choices that define you. Let your actions match the legend." Ethan had begun to understand that fully. He was not famous because of the bite. He was remembered because he had stood his ground, faced danger, and protected those around him. That was human strength in action, the kind that no one could take away. As months passed, the human and the warrior became a symbol of hope across the frontier. Systems once fearful of attack now believed that humans could stand among the stars with courage and honor. And in the quiet moments, when Kalera and Ethan watched the endless expanse of stars, they knew that the bond they shared would guide them through anything the galaxy might send their way. Ethan smiled, feeling the weight and pride of the journey he had taken. The mark was more than a bite. It was the beginning of a legend, a story of courage, trust, and the extraordinary power of humans among the stars. And in every system that heard it, one truth became clear: the human who had been marked by a warrior was not just protected. He was respected, feared, and above all, remembered.